Gospel according to Mark. One of the scribes came to Jesus and asked him, "Which is the first of all the commandments?" Jesus replied, "The first is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." The scribe said to him, "Well said, teacher. You are right in saying he is one and there is no other than he. And to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is worth more than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." And when Jesus saw that he answered with understanding, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And no one dared to ask him any more questions. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
What scripture passage, text from the Catechism, or saying from a saint or pope would you use to encapsulate Christianity? How is the Christian life, or life as a Roman Catholic, summed up? One of the scribes, one of those learned in the law and all things Jewish, came to Jesus with a simple question: which is the first of all the commandments? Jesus' answer cleverly combines two commandments to be the greatest. So he pulls from Deuteronomy, our first reading today: "Hear, O Israel, you shall love the Lord your God with your whole being." And then he pulls from Leviticus: "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." So he brings the two together. That is what is new. That is what is new. That's the new commandment. Because until Jesus, no one had ever combined the two. And during the time of Jesus and before the time of Jesus, how they understood "you shall love your neighbor as yourself," they understood it as "you shall love your fellow Jew." You are to love the people in your tribe, in your faith community. That's how they understood it. And anyone outside of that circle, you could love if they were your ally. But if they were not your ally, you were not obligated to love them. So Jesus is going to expand what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. He'll tell the story of the Good Samaritan. So your neighbor includes those people you don't like, those people who are your enemies. So he broadens the circle. It's really the world community. We are to love everyone, because everyone is my neighbor. So in this, the law is summed up, and it's more meaningful than burnt offerings and sacrifices. More meaningful than burnt offerings and sacrifices. More meaningful than the chaplet of divine mercy. More meaningful than observing Lent. More meaningful than being here on Sunday. More meaningful than fasting. More meaningful than our devotions. Those are the burnt offerings and sacrifices. And oftentimes it's easier to observe Lent, to observe First Fridays, to say the Stations of the Cross, to pray the Rosary, to be engaged in our devotionals. Oftentimes that's much easier than to love our neighbor. So, For us as Christians, how is our life summed up? By going to Mass on Sundays and holy days? Absolutely. We are to go to Mass on Sunday and holy days. It's to enable us, to empower us to love our neighbor. All our burnt offerings and sacrifices, everything that I list and then some, they are to empower us, they are to enable us, they are to equip us to love our neighbor. I come to Mass so that I might love my neighbor and be obedient to God's commandments. I pray the rosary so that I might love my neighbor and be obedient to God's commandments. Might there be something more foundational to the Christian life than our doctrines, as important as they are, our creeds, our holy days? Perhaps Jesus' words are meant for us too. If only we love God and our neighbor as ourselves. There is a Texas saying, and there's a number of Texas sayings that I really like. Here's one. Boil the pot dry. Boil the pot dry. It means that when we get down to the gist of the matter, what's left? When we boil away any excess, what remains? Today, Jesus will boil the pot dry and let us know that the essence of the Torah, the essence of sacred scripture, the essence of the gospel is to love God and to love one's neighbor as oneself. The first two purposes of life. Love God, worship. Love others, connect and service. And then go and make disciples. That's sacred scripture in a nutshell. And so the challenge for me in terms of preaching is how do I say 52 different ways of love God and love neighbor? Because that really is the gospel. And I can pack it up right now and just go home. It's boil the pot dry. So love of God and love of neighbor go hand in hand. Like two sides of the same coin, they cannot be separated. Love of God and love of neighbor are inseparable twins. Where you find one, you find the other. And where you don't find one, you don't find the other. They're inseparable. And I know how much I love God and the depth of that love by how I love my neighbor in the depth of that love. The Apostle John, in his first letter, chapter 4, verse 20, underscores this point in his letter. He says, if anyone says, I love God, but hates his brother or sister, he is a liar. For whoever does not love a brother or sister whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. This is the commandment we have from him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother or sister. As I said, I think it's easier to do our burnt offerings and sacrifices than it is to love. So, it was a few months ago, I invited you to take a look at your landscape around prayer. So I'm going to invite you back to that landscape in terms of how's your loving. And remember the 5 F's? Okay. So let's take a look at our landscape, where we live, move, and have our being. So the first F is family. And family includes our immediate family and our extended family. And that's really where love begins. We hear that charity begins at home. And so how's our loving our family members? How's that coming along? So just take a look at that landscape. Take a look at your family. Take a look at your extended family. That's where we learn to love. That's where we learn to lay down our lives. Our second reading today from Hebrews. That's where we learn to make sacrifices It begins there. Because the key to loving God and neighbor is to love the members of our own family. If we are loving towards the members of our own family, then we are probably loving in our approach to our neighbor. And if we are loving in our approach to our neighbor, we are probably loving in our approach to God. The second F, friends. And just take a look at people that you connect with. Take a look at your friends. You know, maybe it's if your grandparents or parents, you've got grandchildren or children in soccer. Maybe your friends are, you know, their parents. And but think of all your friendships. The third F, firm, factory. It's the workplace. Now, some of you are retired, but take a look at all those relationships. So a question I have to ask myself, how loving am I towards staff? How loving am I towards heads of ministry? The people that I work with. How loving are you around the water cooler and around your boss? And if you are the boss as a supervisor, how loving are you towards those who are under, shall we say, your authority, your power? How loving are we? How loving are you? I always say that you can judge a person by how they treat someone that they don't have to be nice to. How we treat someone that we don't have to be nice to. Okay? So, the fourth F. So we've gone from family, friends, firm, or factory, now to fun. The people that we recreate with. Huh? We share hobbies with. Maybe we're part of a bowling league, huh? Or a cycling club, or we hike on Saturday mornings with a group of people. Think about the people that you have fun with. How loving are you towards the people that you have fun with? And then the fifth F, and actually I could add one more and I will, but the fifth F would be your frequent relationships, probably people that you may not know their name, but they serve you your coffee, your breakfast. They serve you at Costco. Wherever you go, those familiar faces, those people that oftentimes you have a very brief conversation. So just think of your landscape. How loving are you? How loving are we towards the people that God has placed in our lives? So to me, that narrows down when Jesus says, love your neighbor, I think of those five at the faith community. How loving are we towards one another? But then we also know we need to go beyond that. And so, you know, something to ponder and think about. We do have an election on Tuesday. So, you know, to pray for our leaders. To pray for them. And to love them. And the way that we love them is by praying for them and speaking of them respectfully. And to pray for our state. To pray for our nation. To pray for our world. To pray for our leaders. To pray for our enemies. Pray for the worldwide community. So our neighbor is the world. Now, I've got one more point and then I'll land it. A few weeks ago, I said that a remedy to materialism is financial giving. That when we give financially, the grip of materialism loosens. Okay? And that's one of the benefits of financial giving. And next week is the money talk. So I'm going to be transparent with you about that. And I'm going to talk about the 4 Ps next week. Okay? And the 4 Ps are all about having skin in the game. And when I talk about financial giving, I'm talking about the first fruits, not the leftovers. Well, another benefit to financial giving is it's an investment in eternity. It's an investment in eternity. In other words, I demonstrate my love for my neighbor. I demonstrate service by giving first fruits, by giving my finances. It's an investment in eternity. And you might say, how so? Well, when you invest in things like our missionary appeal, and 2 weeks ago we had the second offering for disaster relief, and we've had offerings for South County outreach, and after Mass today we have the shoe sponsorship drive. No, when we invest in these offerings, we are helping people come to Christ. Come to Christ. And there's nothing better than that. See how they love one another. We bring our neighbors to Christ through our financial giving. It's an investment in eternity. When we invest in things like that, we are literally investing in things that are helping people get to heaven that may not have had the chance otherwise. So think about this. When you're in heaven, someone is going to come up to you and thank you for helping get them to heaven. They're going to thank you. And you're going to say, I don't know you. Have we ever met? Have we ever met? I think part of the joy of heaven, the surprise of heaven, is encountering people saying to us, thank you. Because of you, I'm here. And so, I'll say something like, I don't know you. Who are you? And they'll say, well, you gave to that missionary appeal. You helped build that house through Habitat for Humanity. You gave to the canned food drive. And my children didn't go home. You sponsored a pair of shoes for my child so that he would have shoes and not be ashamed when he went to school. All of that because of you. And because of that, because you care, because your faith community cared, you put me on the path to knowing Jesus. How cool is that? How cool is that? To me, that's the joy of eternal life, the joy of being with the Lord. You're in here because of me, because I gave financially to the church so that they could serve, and you're here because of that. That's when you give to the treasure of heaven, there will literally be people there because of you. And we can literally impact eternity with our giving today. So that's one of the benefits. That's how we serve. One of the ways that we serve. One of the ways that we help. One of the ways that we support. It's one of the ways that we demonstrate our love and show that we care. And so we now gather around the altar to celebrate the ultimate act of service, the ultimate act of care and love. And that is our beloved Lord giving us his body and his blood. Let us now stand and confess.